In this issue of ABC's Wide World of Flying, you'll get a left seat checkout in Aerospatial's trio of light airplanes. The fixed-gear Tobago, the normally aspirated Trinidad, and the weather-topping turbocharged Trinidad. Phil Boyer will give you professional tips on how to use the video camcorder to record your flights for long-term enjoyment. Wide World of Flying producer Dave Jackson takes you through a 10-day instrument rating course, and our cameras are with him right through the check ride. We take you behind the scenes to show you how helicopters are used in the shooting of Hollywood movies and commercials. You'll meet some of the top pilots in this highly specialized field. And finally, Captain Barry Schiff will help you to understand spins better, especially the real killers. The over-the-top spin and the under-the-bottom spin. In our bonus buyer's guide at the end of the tape, John King will tell you about the benefits of flying slower, and Martha King will explain additional facts that the temperature dew point spread can tell you. And the AOPA invites you to its upcoming convention in Nashville, Tennessee. All this and more in this issue of ABC's Wide World of Flying.
Welcome to a milestone video edition of ABC's Wide World of Flying, the first issue of our second year and our fifth videotape. A special thanks to all of you who have renewed your subscription, many for a full 2 years. These renewals are important to us since they demonstrate your acceptance of our unique aviation product. Now, if you're among those who haven't renewed, do so right away. You'll find renewal instructions on the mailing package containing your videotape, or call toll-free to 1-800-999-8783. You know, there isn't a pilot from student to ATP that doesn't use the standard sectional chart. And in any unusual situation, I grab for my trusty sectional, even when flying IFR. Well, late last year, those trusty charts came up missing information. By now, I'm sure you're aware that the airport information block was removed from all airports within the blue rectangle, signifying coverage by a terminal area chart. And obviously, the government excuse was to unclutter the sectional. Now, the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association was on this case literally before it happened. The majority response from AOPA members was that all the information should go back on the sectional, citing it was a safety hazard to take anything off. All pilots stated that they carry a terminal area chart if planning to fly into a TCA, but what about an emergency? During this critical period, their only map, the sectional, would be missing vital information. Even the FAA inspectors in the field agreed. Now, the matter is now at the administrator's level, and no one is being very aggressive about reversing the decision. Your pressure is really needed and should be directed to the administrator himself. Write T. Allen McCarter, Administrator, FAA, National Headquarters, 800 Independence Avenue Northwest, Washington, D.C., 20591. It would be most helpful if you would copy your letter to AOPA, which is building up a large file on this subject and has had well over a dozen meetings to overturn the action. But right now, let's start our second year of information-packed stories with this video edition of ABC's Wide World of Flying.
The trio of personal airplanes behind me have been making waves in the U.S. for the last 4 years. They're the Tobago, Trinidad, and Trinidad TC. All three products of the Socata division of France's giant aerospace conglomerate Aerospatiale. Despite a down market, the unusual French singles have achieved surprising sales. And ABC's Wide World of Flying has come to Aerospatiale's U.S. marketing headquarters in Texas to examine the reasons for the model's success. Here in Dallas, Aerospatiale General Aviation Incorporated runs the U.S. marketing effort. The American subsidiary reassembles components shipped over from the parent company's Tarbes, France factory and distributes the completed airplanes to its 6 American dealers. Since their introduction in 1984, Aerospatiale General Aviation has marketed some 105 Tobagos and Trinidads in the U.S., about $12 million worth of airplanes, so it's apparent they must be doing something right. You might expect the company that produces such exotic hardware as Exocet missiles, the supersonic Concorde, Airbus 300 and 320, and Mach 2 Mirage fighters to take a high-tech attitude toward their light singles, and sure enough, Aerospatiale does. Christmas of 1968 was a highly memorable one for the man standing to my left. As command pilot of Apollo 8, Frank Borman, along with Jim Lovell and Bill Anders, was orbiting the moon 60 miles up at 3,500 knots. Borman retired from the Air Force in 1970 and went on to become chairman of the board of Eastern Airlines. Today, however, Frank flies a little closer to the Earth. He's a consultant for Aerospatiale and one of the most knowledgeable guys you'll find on the subject of the Aerospatiale Tobago and Trinidad. Frank, could you tell me a little bit about the design goals Aerospatiale had in mind when they designed the Tobago and the Trinidad?
Aerospatiale started out with the same design goals that any producer of a general aviation airplane would. They wanted to build an efficient, safe, and affordable airplane. This airplane, for instance, has fewer than 1,000 man-hours involved in its manufacture, fewer than 1,000 parts in the whole airplane. They use the digital control machines that are used in producing parts for the Airbus.
Easy maintenance was a major consideration in the design. Isn't that true, Frank?
Easy maintenance was a primary design goal. They've done a lot of things, some major and some just minor. The instrument panels, for instance, tilt forward so you can work at it without standing on your head. The mechanics are going to love that. The wing spar has a guarantee of 10,000 hours, and all of the airframe has been triple corrosion proof. So they started with a clean piece of paper, they did it right, and they built in easy maintainability.
Aerodynamically, I understand Aerospatiale pulled out all the stops to come up with a design that was as easy to fly and docile as possible.
They did. Of course, again, the advantage of modern technology has helped them enormously. They have a very modern semi-symmetrical airfoil. They've used flush riveting where it counts, and they've succeeded. If you really wanted to define a benign stall, you ought to try one in the Trinidad. It's a piece of cake.
Other features on the modern Aerospatiale singles include bonded upper wing surfaces, push rods rather than cables for control activation, tough trailing beam landing gear, and an unusual tail design with totally separate horizontal and vertical stabilizers. The bottom of the Aerospatiale line is the Tobago, a simple fixed-gear airplane designed to compete head-on with Piper's Archer and Cessna's non-retractable Cutlass, though the latter Cessna is now out of production. The Tobago is a handsome package of airplane that uses roughly the same wing and fuselage as the other two models, but requires only about 600 man-hours to assemble, making this one of the least labor-intensive singles available. The Tobago flies behind a carbureted 180 horsepower Lycoming 0360 engine rated for 2,000 hours between overhauls. Certainly one of the most bulletproof power plants in the industry. The same wing is shared by all three models and employs a fairly conventional airfoil with high dihedral for added stability and a constant chord 32-foot span for a low stall speed. Wing area is only 128 square feet, generating a high wing loading and a smoother ride in turbulence. Perhaps the airplane's signature, however, is their typically French flair for style and elegance. In some respects, the TB series are closer to grand touring automobiles than light aircraft. First, there's the gull-wing cabin door design, reminiscent of the Mercedes 300 SL, Bricklin, and more recently the DeLorean, but unique among production airplanes to the Aerospatiale singles. As a consultant for Aerospatiale, you've probably had many opportunities to fly the airplane on cross-country trips. What's your opinion of the job Aerospatiale has done on the cabin comfort on the airplane?
Well, I have flown it a lot cross-country, including as recently as this morning. I came in from Las Cruces to Fullerton in 4 hours and a very comfortable ride. It's a wide cabin. The seats were designed by someone who understood human anatomy, and something that a lot of people don't focus on, but living in New Mexico I do. It's got excellent ventilation, which is really a requirement in so much of this country. And of course, the ladies and the old grandpas like me will also enjoy the wing doors. It makes getting in and out very, very much easier.
Aerospatiale's TB series has the widest and most comfortable interiors of any light singles, with seat adjustments in every direction, even lumbar support. You'd almost think you were relaxing in a Recaro. Better still, for passengers in back, the cabin has the same horizontal dimension, 50 inches. In contrast, even the alleged standard of the industry, Beech's Bonanza, averages a cross-section of only 42 inches. Technically, you could carry 3 people in back, but they'd have to be narrow of hip to fit. Despite its width, the cabin is only 42 inches tall, so headroom demands the seats be slightly reclined. Performance of the Tobago is about what you'd expect from a 180 horsepower engine lifting 2,500 pounds of airplane. The Tobago has to gather itself for takeoff, but once speed is up to 70 knots or so, it will lift off and climb out at a reasonable 800 feet per minute. If you climb up to 6,500 feet density altitude, you can expect a max cruise speed of about 125 knots, or 117 knots at 65% power. This doesn't make the Tobago the quickest fixed-gear single for the horsepower, but considering the airplane's uncommon comfort and cabin room, Tobago owners rarely complain. Retract the wheels, add 70 horsepower out front, and somewhat predictably, performance improves in virtually all areas. The Trinidad is Aerospatiale's most popular model, with a significantly derated injected 540 cubic inch, 250 horsepower Lycoming on the nose, also approved for a 2,000 hour TBO. Given such encouragement, climb jumps to 1,200 feet per minute. Cruise increases 35 knots to about 160, and range improves to nearly 1,000 nautical miles.
Okay, we're out of 5,000 feet right now in the little Trinidad, holding VY on the airplane. We should note that we've got about a 20 degrees centigrade day, and that's well above normal temperature for this altitude. Yet we're still getting just about 1,000 feet a minute out of 5,000 feet, so it's fairly obvious that the airplane is easily capable of the book spec of 1,280 feet a minute at sea level. Also, we're a little bit undergross today. Right now we're out of 6,000 feet holding VY and still getting a good solid 1,000 feet a minute in the airplane. Okay, here we are, level at 7,500 feet over central Texas. We've set up maximum cruise power, 75%, with an outside air temperature of about 15 degrees centigrade. And in moderately rough air, getting a lot of thermal turbulence off the ground below. We're getting a true airspeed right around 165 knots. That's a little bit better than book, but on the other hand, temperature is a little high and the load is a little light. So the two factors may cancel each other out.
If you did have to spend 7 hours in a Trinidad to span half the continent, You'd be traveling in comfort and style, more reminiscent of a plush Peugeot than a general aviation single. And at 155 to 165 knots, you'd be doing it at 3 times freeway speed. Best of all, when it's time to return to the airport, you can use approach speeds only a few knots above those of the Tobago, since the Trinidad's 54-knot stall speed is only 2 knots higher than the Tobago's. The top of Aerospatiale's line, however, is the Trinidad TC. As you might have guessed, this is nearly a carbon copy Trinidad, but with an air research blower under the bonnet. Basically the same engine used in pairs on the Turbo Aztec. The advantages of turbocharging should be obvious. If you fly in hot climates or where the clouds have rocks in them, a turbo can be your performance hedge. In the Trinidad application, turbocharging increases cruise by another 25 knots, provided you're willing to climb to tall altitudes. At 3,100 pounds, the Turbo Trinidad is the heaviest of the 3 models, yet it carries the same fuel as the standard Trinidad, 86 gallons. Payload with full tanks works out to only about 600 pounds, 3 people and baggage worth, but that's not very different from other 4-seat singles. On a typically equipped airplane, you'll have to leave 30 gallons behind in order to haul 4 folks. Turbo boost makes the Trinidad fairly enthusiastic going uphill. It's interesting to note that this gives the Trinidad TC the best climb in its class. Turbocharging allows the Trinidad TC to climb to 25,000 feet if a pilot really wants to, but most pilots don't. So today we're going to stop at 10,500, 12,500, and 14,500 to test the Trinidad TC's cruise.
Okay, here we are at 10,500 feet, leveling the airplane for cruise. And it's here where you'll notice the extreme effectiveness of the elevator trim on the Trinidad. Both elevator trim and rudder trim are extremely fast, and the airplane trims up very nicely for cruise. We're using 75% power per the book. We have power set at 2,400 RPM and about 25 inches of manifold pressure, burning about 16.5 gallons an hour, again straight out of the book. And we've got an indicated airspeed 141 knots for 171 knots true. That's about 5 knots ahead of the book, but that's not really too surprising considering that we're probably a good 300 pounds under gross today.
Obvious advantage of the Turbo is that climb holds up very well at high altitude. You can often see practically the same vertical speed at 10,000 or 15,000 feet as you do at sea level. In the Trinidad TC's case, 1,000 feet per minute.
Here at 12,500, we're leveling the airplane for cruise. One of the really nice features of having turbocharging under the bonnet is that we can maintain 75% cruise power to a much higher altitude. At 12.5 in a normally aspirated airplane, we'd only be developing about 55% power with the throttle all the way to the wall, but up here in this airplane, we can easily develop 75% without any trouble at all. So we're going to let it run on out and see what kind of cruise numbers we can generate at 12,500. Now that things have settled down a little bit, you can see cruise has finally stabilized at 140 knots indicated airspeed for 175 knots true on just about 14.5 gallons per hour. This is the highest altitude at which we can operate without oxygen, so we'll strap on the mask now and head for 14,500 feet. We've jumped up to 14,500 feet, a popular altitude for turbocharged airplanes since it's well under the positive control area. You can see our airspeed has settled on an indicated 141 knots with an OAT of plus 3 degrees centigrade. Gives us a true of about 180 knots. Considering that we're still burning only about 14.5 gallons per hour, the same as we were down at 12.5, that's a good trade provided you're willing to pay for the oxygen needed to fly at these altitudes.
The Trinidad, Tobago, and Trinidad TC all benefit from good visibility and excellent handling. Side windows are cut well up into the roof, and the windshield is wide and tall, allowing a good view in all directions except straight down. Roll rate is good, with pitch not far behind. The rudder is probably the slowest of control modes, but fortunately, the Trinidad demands little coordination and maneuvering. Patterns are simple at any speed that conditions or ATC demand. You can comply with go-down, slow-down requests by extending the gear, or blaze down final at 129 knots to stay ahead of the jet at the outer marker. Throw the wheels to the wind on short final, and still stop in a little over 1,500 feet. Aerospatiale's singles are the first foreign airplanes to make significant inroads into the American general aviation market. Base priced at $79,000 for a fixed-gear Tobago, $119,000 for a normally aspirated retractable Trinidad, and $141,000 for the turbocharged Trinidad TC. The French singles cost very nearly the same as their U.S. classmates, yet they offer comfort and style, if not performance, that's rare or unavailable on competing models. Their wide, roomy cabins, plushly padded seats, gull-wing doors, and highly individual tail configuration set them off from the crowd. Virtually every general aviation design represents a series of compromises between considerations of comfort, performance, efficiency, and useful load. But Aerospatiale's handsome singles offer a good combination of ingredients with the emphasis on comfort.
A rectangular wing, as compared to other wing plan forms, has a tendency to stall first at the wing root, providing adequate stall warning, wing root, providing inadequate stall warning, or wing tip, providing inadequate stall warning. The correct answer is number 1, the wing root, which provides adequate stall warning.
A majority of our subscribers own or have access to video camcorders, some not much heavier or bulkier than a single-lens reflex still camera. In my What's New feature for this video issue, I'd like to show you how to use a camcorder in an airplane to produce both pictures and sound that won't bore your non-flying friends. Now, just like you organize your flight materials, do the same with your aviation video kit. Keep everything together to make it much easier to locate items during that busy flight environment. Be sure you purchase extra batteries and keep them charged. Battery power is the most important item for these little machines, and as the wide world of flying crew knows, you can never have too much. Usually camcorders come with one battery, and I recommend buying at least 2 extras for a total of 3. If you have a 12 to 14 volt system and plan to shoot in your airplane a lot, get the optional car battery cord adapter, which generally plugs into the cigarette lighter. Probably the most important item in my aviation video kit is this still photographer's C-clamp. Now, you can find these in any serious photo store. The heavy-duty models will support most lightweight camcorders. This device makes mounting the camera in the airplane much, much easier. A wide-angle or fisheye lens allows you to shoot the instrument panel and interiors in your cramped cabin to full advantage, since most camcorders have limited wide-angle view. If you've got a small battery-operated TV, include this in your case. Oftentimes this is useful as a monitor to compose your shot when you can't see in the viewfinder. Ultraviolet and haze filters perform much the same functions as with still photography. Don't expect a haze filter to make a 5-mile visibility day look like 50 miles, however. They just aren't that effective. Now, while video is important, don't forget about the sound, which adds a great deal to your aviation home video. All camcorders have built-in microphones, but these generally pick up engine noise in flight, overriding all the other sound. This attenuating cord, available from Radio Shack, model number 422152A, and the proper adapter plugs will allow you to take your intercom audio and put it directly into the camcorder, bypassing the regular microphone. The attenuating part of this common-looking cable is important since it reduces the headset signal, allowing it to go into the mic input. Now, you may need a Y adapter to still use the intercom headset. Jerry Carker, a Wide World of Flying subscriber from Canada, offers this tip. He says rather than plugging into the intercom directly, you can purchase an inexpensive telephone suction cup microphone. Merely place the microphone on your headset and plug the other end into your camcorder mic input. There are two traps when shooting with newer automatic camcorders from inside an aircraft: auto exposure and autofocus. Outside light fools the camera's automatic lens setting system. People inside the plane will come out as black silhouettes. If you can manually override this feature, do so, using the viewfinder to set the proper exposure. Otherwise, use the backlight button to brighten up the interior. Always turn off the autofocus and focus the lens manually. With this automatic feature on, many cameras will focus on the windows, and your outside shots of the ground will be blurry. Even if your camera reads through plexiglass, a shot of a wing or engine cowling will fake out the focusing system, making these close-in items appear clear and the ground fuzzy. When shooting through the windows, look out for reflections. Get the lens right up to the plexiglass to avoid as many reflections as possible. However, watch that your lens hood isn't rubbing the window, since it can leave deep scratches on the plastic. Black electrical tape wrapped on the hood shields the sharp edge and prevents this scratching. Shooting air to ground is difficult with a handheld camera. Brace the camera against your body so it is as steady as possible. Get your pilot to fly 1,000 to 2,000 feet above the ground rather than trying to zoom in from a high altitude. The object is to zoom back as wide as possible. If you zoom in, the telephoto portions of the lens will really accent any movement and cause bouncy pictures. The wide-angle or fisheye lens is essential for almost all aircraft interiors. Don't forget to include yourself in the picture occasionally by merely holding the camera up against the windshield and shooting back into the cabin. For panel shots, the wide-angle lens is essential again. Here's the difference with and without the accessory lens in my Baron. When shooting the panel, make sure you stay away from including the windshield, which will allow outside light to set auto exposure. Otherwise, you'll end up with a black hole where you expected to read instruments. In addition, most cameras have a macro lens setting for extreme close-ups. This is useful for dramatic shots of single instruments filling the entire screen, such as illustrating your altitude to a destination. Add a little motion to otherwise still shots by simple moves like resetting the altimeter. Using this same macro feature, you can title your video by shooting the destination or flight path off the sectional chart. Hold the camera steady, since focus is real critical, and make sure the outside light hitting the map is even. Now remember that C-clamp I showed you earlier? Well, here's how to use it for sensational shots of approaches and landings. Many of you know what kind of result you get when the person in the right seat tries to handhold the camera during landing. At best, it looks like an approach in heavy turbulence, and the landing appears as a controlled crash. On the ground, take the C-clamp and mount it on the glare shield in front of the co-pilot position. Carefully align the camera so it points straight ahead, showing just a little of the engine cowling or nose in the lower portion of the screen. It's often helpful to remove the electronic viewfinder if your model allows, or use the battery TV for setting the clamp and camera to the right position. Make sure the zoom is full wide, the manual focus is on infinity, and the autofocus is off. For the full effect, plug the audio cable into your intercom and the other end into your camcorder mic input. The results are quite dramatic.
You know, while we're demonstrating cockpit taping, I'd like to give you a tip that might save you both time and money. You know, we as plane owners oftentimes find maintenance problems that only seem to occur in the air, and our shops never seem to be able to find them on the ground. Well, when that happens, I carry my trusty camcorder with me, and I videotape the problem. To illustrate, let's say the number 2 nav isn't capturing the station like it should. Well, first I video the frequency, then the altitude. I use the DME to show the distance from the station. I use that audio cord we talked about for audio from the nav. And then I show the comparison to nav 1. Now, the impact of giving the videotape to the shop itself sometimes gets the problem solved.
One time I taped my plane being checked out at a Barron service clinic in Albany, New York, performed by a beach factory technician from the American Bonanza Society. His explanations were recorded using the built-in camcorder mic. I later supplied this tape to my service shop at Teterboro for their mechanics to view procedures they found very useful. Two rules that have served professionals and amateurs well, both in the air and on the ground. First, don't pan. And second, use the zoom lens sparingly. Now, rules are made to be broken, but it's best for beginners to remember these and try to stick with them. New camcorder users tend to think the only way to show a large scene is to pan the camera across the horizon, airport, runway, or whatever. Don't do it. Break the large scene into a sequence of smaller scenes, stopping the camera between each move. Let the action occur within the scene itself rather than panning across. Now, the same applies to the zoom lens. Often camcorder users are tempted to zoom in and out while the camera is running. Better to stop, zoom, and then restart the tape. In a future video issue of ABC's Wide World of Flying, we'll concentrate on video techniques on the ground to properly shoot destinations and fly-ins. If you've already mastered some of these techniques, don't forget about our video letters to the editor section. Yes, you can share your home video from a fly-in destination with other viewers by sending a description to ABC's Wide World of Flying, 6910 Havenhurst, Suite 106, Van Nuys, California, 91406. Remember, send a description only, not the actual tapes. Our staff will contact you for materials and help edit the tape into a mini feature. And that's just what happened with a tape submitted by Bill McKinney and Pierre Chanteau on a visit to the Piper factory.
Dear Editor, for the longest while, like some migrating fowl, my airplane had this tendency to turn south. In March, I stopped resisting and let 92 Whiskey pick up a heading of 210 that pointed us towards Vero Beach. This is where, 20 years ago, she rolled off the Piper line for her first flight, the 49th Cherokee 235C of the 216 ever made. We had called ahead to Piper and were surprised to be greeted by 14 old hands still on the line who had worked on 92 Whiskey, and they joined us for a homecoming. It was quite a pleasure for me to meet them, and it looked like they enjoyed getting reacquainted, too. The 235's got the big 0540 Lycoming engine used in the 6-place Cherokees, generating 300 horsepower, but downrated here with lower compression jugs to 235 horses, so she could burn clean 80 octane with 25% of the lead content of today's 100 low lead. After our reunion, we stepped inside the plant to see what's going on today. Here, the current generation of Warriors and Arrows are being fabricated and assembled, as well as the highly successful Malibu. What a pleasure to see new airplanes coming off the line today. I hope the owner of this new Cherokee will have as much pleasure in the next 20 years as I have had with 92 Whiskey. By the way, Vero is a great place to visit, even if you're not coming for a birthday party. There's a new training center going up for pilots and owners, always lots going on in the factory, and they make you feel at home right away. So heading north still wasn't easy.
An ATC transponder is not to be used unless it has been tested, inspected, and found to comply with regulations within the preceding 30 days, 12 calendar months, or 24 calendar months. The correct answer is number 3, 24 calendar months.
Like a lot of you, I'd been thinking about getting my instrument rating for a long time. So when Phil Boyer asked me to take the 10-day instrument training program from Professional Instrument Courses, or PIC, for a Wide World of Flying feature, I jumped at the chance. I've been flying for 7 years and have a total of 430 hours in Moonies, Grumman Tigers, Cessna 172s and 182s, and Piper Archers. The PIC course is unique in that it crams more than the required 40 hours of instrument training program into 10 days or less. It seems perfect for busy guys like me, so long as it works and doesn't skimp on quality, and that's what we're going to find out. I checked into the Airtel Plaza Hotel at the Van Nuys, California airport to get settled and ready to go. Here, I'd be able to concentrate without interruptions from the kids.
Hi, welcome to the Airtel Plaza Hotel.
Later that day, I met Dick Eckley from PIC and got acquainted with the man I'd be spending the next 10 days with. PIC has instructors based all over the U.S., and Dick had flown in from Denver to be my instructor. Before Dick arrived, I used the PIC Instrument Flight Training Manual with flashcards and audio cassettes to pass my written instrument exam with a 90. Since I have a long drive to work, the audio cassettes were an efficient way for me to study.
You're undoubtedly already familiar with all three of these. The TWEB, the TWEB, is a broadcast, and it resembles the area forecast, but it is organized along a route.
Dick had brought a computerized simulator with him from Denver, complete with rudder pedals and avionics. Every PIC student uses the simulator for both formal training in the daytime and unlimited practice in the evenings. All this time is loggable, even though only 20 hours can count toward your ticket.
We have a field selector, left and right.
Okay.
Okay, good for 45 minutes for tank, and you will have to change tanks, or it will run out of gas. Flap selector, 3 position, again. And to the right of that is a trim system.
Little trim wheel right there.
Up, down. You have your throttle quadrant, throttle first, propeller control, and mixture.
Okay.
The normal navigation and communication panel above that.
ADF, comm, nav, and the transponder.
Today we started with Dave this morning and introduced him to the simulator. Of course, the usual things. We talked in terms of how all of the instruments operated and introduced him to the various maneuvers that we were going to be doing. And in terms of the steep turn, that maneuver is quite challenging. The climbing and descending turns where you introduce the climb, the descent, the integration with the clock, that type of thing. His cross-check was quite rapid. A little bit of rate of descent on the entry, which he quickly corrected. A little bit of balloon on the exit, which he quickly corrected. This afternoon, Dave and I will go out in the airplane and we'll be doing a repeat of the types of practices we were doing this morning. First of all, starting with level turns, then climbing and descending turns, finally getting into steep turns, and the last thing we'll be doing is the unusual attitudes, which kind of everybody dreads, but it's something we must go through.
Okay, let's try and do some of these things with your hood on, okay? All right. I have the airplane a minute, you put your hood on, all right? First of all, close your eyes. Okay. And put your head over in a 90-degree position. And we'll presume that you're looking for a pencil on the floor or something similar to that.
Flying the tabletop simulator was good for learning the principles of basic maneuvering, but you need a real airplane to practice those principles. I had no trouble with basic maneuvers, and contrary to Dick's prediction, I enjoyed unusual attitude recovery.
You have the aircraft. Okay. Power. All the wings.
We did the unusual attitude maneuver several times with reference just to needle, ball, and airspeed. I was glad to be flying a simple 172. I was busy enough just learning IFR procedures and attitude control. My plan was to get my instrument ticket in the 172 and then move up to complex aircraft later.
Now that you've been having so much fun and enjoying it so much, you didn't realize that we've been flying up here for close to an hour, did you? In fact, over an hour. So why don't you take your hood off, take a break. Oh, what on earth are you sweating for?
Am I sweating? I spent an hour?
All right.
15 minutes.
Time goes by when you're having fun, right?
Yes.
Each phase of the PIC program coordinates the learning process in ground school, in the simulator, and in the airplane. Day 2, for example, included 3 hours of flying practice and a full afternoon of ground school. On days 3 and 4, Dick used the simulator to introduce me to the various instrument approaches, which I then practiced in the airplane on days 6 and 7. Dick's work with me ended at about sundown, but my work continued into the evening. Every night was devoted to assigned homework, and as each day passed, I felt the pressure building. So much to learn, and the check ride so close.
So let's start off with question 1 then.
Okay, number 1. A specific attitude plus a specific power setting equals a specific performance.
Okay. Do you have any problem with that, or have you tried this approach to flying before?
I've heard this theory before, and I suppose I kind of fly that way to some degree because I will look at the attitude indicator, but I fly how I just kind of been flying, basically.
That's a rather basic principle that we incorporate in our training. As Dave was going through the course, his progress for the first 4 or 5 days was rather striking and remarkable. This comes from a great deal of capacity for learning a lot of very intricate details. But he started to push himself, I believe, just a little too hard. So to speak, the stress was getting to him, the very high stress level, promoted primarily from his own initiative.
At this point, should I go 5 degrees to the right, do you think, to offset that?
Go back to the 20 degrees to get back on course, and then come back to the 5.
Okay. Shallow turn back to 330.
The 8th day of training is the cross-country day in our particular curriculum. And on that day, it's almost a day of relaxation and proving that you have learned several different things, and kind of starting to put them all together. And as we started through the day, initially Dave was uptight, so to speak, to a certain degree. As we progressed through the day, it was basically taking off, climbing to altitude, going in and making a nice approach, stopping, taking a break, and going on a second leg.
Cessna 050, the Paradise VOR is out of service currently. Flight heading 095, vector Chino.
095 for 050.
That's correct. Cessna 050, contact Ontario approach 125.5.
25.5, thank you.
Burbank, NASA 7.
K250, join Victor 16, Skywest 214.
Ontario approach, Cessna 54050 is with you, level 5000.
Cessna 54050, Ontario approach, line clear, Chino weather, sky partially obscured, estimated ceiling 1000 broken. Visibility 2, fog haze, wind 270 at 5, altimeter 3011, runway 26, stay active. Depart Paradise heading 050, vectors ILS 26, approach Chino.
Should we talk to him about that, Paradise, out of service?
050, understand Paradise out of service, over. Cessna 050, correction, that Paradise VOR is out of service, my mistake. Fly heading 090, vectors ILS 26, approach at Chino.
Roger, appreciate an NDB Charlie approach into Chino, if we can work it out, over.
Cessna 050, expect the NDB Charlie approach into Chino. Cessna 73.
I was starting to get the hang of it, but that controller swamped me with information. How could anyone possibly copy everything he said? But somehow I had to keep up.
Dave, you know, you can always call the approach if you're getting radar vector and ask him to verify when you're inbound, you clear to descend at 2500, and he can plot that on his chart and tell you too.
Oh, okay.
Just an additional helpmate.
Cessna 050, descend and maintain 3000.
050 out of 5 to 3.
I was quickly learning what aviate, navigate, and communicate are really all about.
Cessna 050, fly heading 090.
090 for 050. And 050 is level 3000.
Cessna 050, thank you. Turn left heading 360.
360 for 050. Standard rate. entry for 360.
And what's your timing inbound?
Timing's going to be 220. No, 236. 050, it's one leg.
Cessna 050, clear to land runway 26.
050.
The cross-country flight required hundreds of miles under the hood with 3 different approaches into 3 different airports, but I was now ready for my final review. What are the classes of VOR and what is the range of each? There's a terminal VOR, it's 25 nautical miles.
Okay.
The low altitude, 40 nautical miles. An H class, which is a high altitude, which below 14,500 is 40 nautical miles. And above 14,500 to 18,000 is 100 nautical miles.
All right.
At the end of the 8th day, it became very obvious that my objectives had been satisfied. Dave had progressed to being a thoroughly competent instrument pilot, no question about it. And the 9th day was basically a review as much as anything.
700, looking for 5, looking for 5. Go down, hold 287, hold 287, 600, 100 feet to go. 287, 287, go back to 287. Go to 285, too much. 500, bring your power in.
Continue on down to your minimums.
Go down to 440.
Go down to 440.
Power back.
Decision height.
Practice was now over, and Dick assured me I was ready. But I can tell you, as day 10 began, I was one pretty nervous fella. The exam begins with a check of your documentation and that of the airplane to ensure that it's IFR current and capable. My examiner then put me through about an hour of oral testing on IFR regulations, emergency procedures, instrument charts, radio failure procedures, what-ifs, and much more.
Okay, fine. You have all the requirements to take an instrument check, and I'll give you several problems that you might work on, and I'll leave you to your own devices while you're doing that. I'll ask you to plan an instrument cross-country to Van Nuys Airport, if you will, please, by the most efficient route you can select. I'll also ask you to work out a weight and balance problem with yourself as pilot, a 180-pound passenger in the front seat, full fuel, and 80 pounds of baggage. And then also compute your takeoff distance here at Riverside Airport under the conditions you anticipate at our departure time.
And Ontario departure system 54050 is with you, 1100 climbing out from Riverside.
There's a 5.050 Ontario departure, radar contact, climb and maintain 6,000.
I had filed for an IFR departure as Mr. Coleman had instructed, but once out of the area, we canceled and immediately began doing the required exercises for testing. First on the list was a hole at an intersection, followed by partial panel and so on. I was very nervous, so I focused all of my attention on doing exactly what was expected of me, virtually hanging on every word spoken by the controllers and Mr. Coleman, and doing my best to hold perfect headings and altitudes.
Okay, continue your heading straight and level at 4,500 feet, please.
And Roger, 050, so we'll be flying straight and level, partial panel, 4,500.
Okay, now we'll do several unusual attitudes, and for this I'll uncover the directional gyro and leave the artificial horizon covered. And when I tell you to take the airplane, do so and recover to straight and level flight on whatever heading and altitude you come out on, please. Okay, you have the airplane. Go ahead and recover. Okay, very good. I have it again. We'll try another one. Okay, now I'll ask you to execute a left climbing spiral at standard rate to 5,500 feet in our present position, please.
As the test continued, I realized my long days of training were really working for me. It was all coming together now, and I had acquired a good basic understanding of what it takes to fly in the IFR system. After doing the climbing spiral, Mr. Coleman had me do the 3 standard approaches, an ILS, VOR, and NDB. Because I was so busy, I really didn't think a lot about whether I was passing or failing. Back on the ground, Mr. Coleman gave me his verdict.
Okay, that was fine. We'll critique the flight when we get in the office, and you passed your flight.
Great, well, thank you very much. It's quite a flight, thank you.
The PIC 10-day course currently costs $3,400. This includes the manuals, unlimited use of the simulator, the instructor, and all of his expenses. Only the airplane is additional. I found the course to be well organized and the instruction excellent. Will this program be right for you? Well, check out your options. A longer program might fit your schedule and cash flow better. But whether you do it in 10 days or 10 months, set a goal and get your rating.
My first introduction to collision avoidance occurred on my first dual cross-country flight many years ago. Air traffic control called up and says, 32 Bravo, you have traffic at 2 o'clock. My instructor looked at me and says, well, son, what does that mean? I looked up at him and said, well, sir, it's only 1:30 right now. We have a half hour before it gets here. Unfortunately, collision avoidance is much more serious a subject than that. Here are a few tips on collision avoidance from the AOPA Air Safety Foundation. Number 1, when flying VFR, a good scan should take about 17 seconds, and your head should be inside the cockpit no more than 3 seconds of those 17 seconds. The biggest complaint that flight test examiners have about pilot applicants is that they spend too much of their time with their head buried inside the cockpit. Number 2, when scanning, focus on 30-degree chunks of airspace at a time, holding your eye still long enough so that any image will imprint on the retina. Remember that your eyes do not effectively register an image if they are moving. Number 3, a 4-year study concerning midairs indicated that 80% of the midairs occurred with a faster airplane overtaking a slower one. This means if you're flying a slow general aviation airplane, you should spend an equal amount of time looking behind you as well as in front of the airplane. This is especially important in a highly congested terminal area that has a mixture of fast and slow airplanes. And 4th, let ATC help you with collision avoidance. Use flight following as often as you can. This service will help you identify more targets that you might not ordinarily detect. When ATC calls traffic, you should state, looking. And if you don't see the target and it's getting closer, then request an avoidance vector. Remember, ATC can't see all the possible targets, so the see and avoid concept is ultimately the pilot's responsibility.
This shot would be impossible to film from a fixed-wing aircraft, but not from a helicopter. Piloting a helicopter camera ship is one of the most challenging jobs in aviation. It combines precision, low-level, close-in work with an in-depth knowledge of motion picture production. In this segment, we'll fly the Bell Jet Ranger and Hughes 300 helicopters, examine sophisticated camera mounts, and meet top pilots John Peterson and Harry House. These photo pilots have developed specialized skills through thousands of hours of demanding flying.
I started out in fixed wing, got my commercial license, went into helicopters, and it's all helicopters since then. I'm not current in fixed wing. I have over 17,700 hours in helicopters. The helicopter will jump right back and bite you. You have to be on top of it every second. You need experience, and it really shows up in this type of flying. There are probably only 10 or 12 fellas in the whole country that are doing this full-time, making a living at it.
In order to make a camera move work for the telling of a story,
they have to accomplish all kinds of complicated movements that a helicopter wouldn't ordinarily involve itself in. And that's why these guys are the very best pilots in the world.
The camera ship is an altogether different thing. 9 times out of 10 you're flying along with the controls all crossed up, perhaps flying sideways, even backwards on occasion. It's just a different type of flying than your normal routine piloting.
Safety is of great importance to the pilots and directors of action films, as well as to the FAA.
Waivers are necessary in the motion picture industry for using aircraft for filming, in that FAR 9179 states that an aircraft will not be operated at less than 500 feet to persons or property on the ground, or less than 1,000 feet over a congested area. Typically, using a helicopter or an airplane for filming necessitates that the aircraft will be operated at less than 500 feet, therefore a waiver is required. We require the operator to develop and submit with their waiver application a motion picture and television flight operations manual. That manual then becomes a part of the waiver.
The most important aspect of the safety manual is that it defines the relationships on the set between the director, producer, and the pilot or aerial coordinator. It also gives the pilot aerial coordinator the authority to stop filming at any time he feels conditions are not safe.
The potential for disaster is unlimited. One of the things we're most worried about is people walking into a tail rotor. The Twilight Zone accident put a real nervousness in the movie industry on helicopter work. And the main lesson of that is that everybody know exactly what's going to happen. When we're dealing with special effects, smoke or dust or what have you, the pilot has to know exactly what's going to happen.
Generally speaking, the helicopter is safer flying than anything else, in my opinion. Everyone thinks helicopters can just hover, take off vertically at any time, anywhere, and everything else, which is not true, of course. They're strictly limited by the performance of the aircraft, the heat of the day, the load that we're carrying. Everything enters into it, just as any other aircraft.
Many industrial films and independent features lack the budget for a turbine-powered ship, and instead shoot from a Hughes 300. The 300C features a fully articulated 3-bladed rotor system. This system includes flapping hinges and a leading lag hinge blade attachment design. This increases maneuverability and lessens stress on the rotor hub. Fixed-wing pilots will recognize the familiar Lycoming Model 360 4-cylinder engine. In this configuration, it develops 190 horsepower at 3,200 RPM with 26 inches of manifold pressure. The engine transmits power through a belt drive system. An idler pulley controlled by the pilot operates as a clutch. The Hughes 300 has 3 major controls. The cyclic control stick and foot pedals give control over the forward motion and attitude of the helicopter. A collective lever with motorcycle-type throttle increases the overall pitch of the rotor disc, controlling lift. Configured for photography with the doors off and a 1,900-pound gross weight, the VNE is 102 miles an hour. With photo or video equipment, 30 gallons of 100-octane low-lead fuel, and 2 persons aboard, range is just under 3 hours. The full power max rate of climb in standard conditions at sea level is 990 feet per minute. With an experienced team like cameraman director Marshall Thompson and pilot John Peterson, this helicopter provides smooth moves and minimal apparent vibration for shooting video and still photography.
Today, John and I are going to fly off of Palos Verdes Peninsula over the ocean, and we'll shoot a fleet of sailboats that are part of a yachting video that I'm producing.
We've already spoken with the Gato, and they have no problem. We filed our special waiver because we're going to be down fairly close to the water. Don't want anybody worried about us.
When we're shooting video, either with a bungee cord support like this or handheld, the wind buffets the camera, so our speed is limited to about 40 miles an hour. Before the flight, we had a production meeting with the sailors to plan our shoot. A handheld VHF transceiver was used to communicate with the boats. The most important goal in marine photography is to create a sense of excitement about a subject that is only traveling 8 miles an hour. We do this by flying around the boats, letting them come in and out of frame at different angles. During editing, we intercut the various images, add music and some special effects, and we've got an exciting sequence. We shot the boats for about 2.5 hours, then refueled in Long Beach for the long flight home.
At Continental Camera in Los Angeles, technicians prepare a Continental Camera mount system for the next day's shooting.
The Continental Magnum mount is designed to isolate vibration on various platforms, including trucks, boats, and helicopters. It's primarily used in the aerial photography business, and one of the basic ships used for this mount is the Bell Jet Ranger. This is the way the camera mount is utilized. Sitting halfway out of the helicopter, the cameraman can hold the mount easily and effortlessly.
The Continental Magnum mount is designed so that a single worker can quickly install it in a Bell Jet Ranger. The entire system, and others like it, must comply to FAR Part 43, governing modifications to the aircraft. A supplementary type certificate must also be obtained from the FAA. At Clay Lacy Aviation in Van Nuys, California, pilot Harry House tugs out a Bell Jet Ranger. This workhorse of the film industry can be found working on movie locations around the world. The Allison 250 turbine engine, downrated to about 320 horsepower, puts the Jet Ranger into a separate league from the piston-driven Hughes 300. The standard Jet Ranger is approved as a 5-place aircraft and can be certified for IFR operations. Above 3,000 pounds gross weight, the VNE is 140 miles per hour from sea level up to 3,000 feet density altitude. The maximum rate of climb is 1,000 feet per minute with an operational ceiling of 20,000 feet.
A turbine engine revolutionized helicopters. The turbine engine is a very reliable engine. The Jet Ranger was built with the operator in mind. It has a good payload, good performance, and the ship is just an all-around good machine for camera work. Flight characteristics of the Jet Ranger that could be improved, possibly the only thing would be the smoothness. However, if you get a good helicopter that's set up properly and the blades are in track, etc., it can be a very smooth machine all through the range. Well, having the crew and equipment aboard sometimes can adversely affect handling because it's the simple fact that you're carrying more weight. We travel as light as we can, fuel-wise and everything else, for best optimum aircraft performance.
Harry's flown the Jet Ranger to the desert for a J. Walter Thompson-produced Ford truck commercial. Off-road racer Manny Esquera's crew prepares a Ford 4x4 pickup for the rugged driving to come. A lot of teamwork, equipment, and expense goes into even a short helicopter-based sequence. Prior to filming, a production meeting joins the pilot, camera operator, truck team, and the producer-director to discuss the day's shooting. When all is ready, truck and helicopter depart for their desert rendezvous.
We'll be in communication with the truck. However, he makes so much noise he can't always hear us. So we may not get through to him every time. The sun is a consideration in early morning or late afternoon if you're driving into it or flying into it. You have to be very aware of the cactus and the sagebrush. Throw in the winds coming around, swirling around some of these mountains and down these gorges in the desert, and it can get pretty interesting. As the day progresses, it'll get much hotter, and in these desert situations, we'll have deteriorating performance in the helicopter. The engines suffer from the heat, and if we're at altitude, they suffer even more, of course.
After a full day of shooting, a grand total of 3.5 seconds of aerial footage show up on a 30-second Ford commercial. Here's the highlights. Preston Cinema Systems takes a different approach to aerial photography. In their gyrosphere system, a gyro-stabilized remote camera mounts beside the fuselage, while the camera operator works inside the ship. This system isolates the camera from the vibration and rotational motion of the helicopter. Dramatic effects like this are impossible without advanced image stabilization equipment. The degree of steadiness is so extraordinary that the film camera can be under-cranked or slowed down to 1 frame per second without noticeable picture shake.
There's a motor here, which is a PAM motor, and it's directly torquing on the gyro system. And you can see the gyro precess, and when you precess it, it causes the platform to spin accordingly. And it's always telling the system to be level, so it really can't get off at a weird angle. It's always going to be level with horizon.
This is the control console that allows me to operate the entire system. We have the television monitor, allows me to see exactly the same image that's going on the film camera. With this control, I have zoom. I can zoom the image in or out. With this control, the red button is for pan and tilt, so the whole platform is operated simply by thumb control. The gyrosphere itself is going to keep that platform dead steady so that the horizon never moves. With that kind of stabilization, we have the ability to run the cameras down at very low frame rates. It might take us 30 minutes, let's say, to fly through the air from one point to another point. And with a low frame rate, we can cut that down to maybe 20 seconds on screen time. So it looks like we're flying about 4,000 miles an hour. With the gyrosphere, there really basically isn't any basic aerodynamic change of the aircraft. There are certain limitations. We are limited, instead of the VNA being 150 miles an hour, our VNE is 80 miles an hour. The angle of bank is greatly reduced because of the system itself and not wanting to put any undue stress on the gyros. And then the other biggest consideration is weight. The gyrosphere system, say, that we're installing weighs approximately 476 pounds. The aircraft has the same basic gross weight, of course, but because of the weight of the system, we have to therefore delete the amount of fuel we put on aircraft, basically limiting how much time we can spend in the air. We definitely have a fuel truck right on location, and we are in the air for possibly no more than 15 to 20 minutes, so we minimize the power we have to utilize in the aircraft to complete the maneuver.
ABC Wide World of Flying TV crews also make use of helicopters in producing these magazine issues. For the Trinidad Tobago segment, producer-director David Jackson shoots air-to-air footage of the Trinidad in Dallas, Texas, from a French-built aerospatial twin-star helicopter. Dave is shooting off the shoulder with a professional 3-chip video camera and records the images on a broadcast-quality 3/4-inch video cassette deck. He communicates with the pilot by way of the ship's intercom. The helicopter is used as a flying tripod as the pilot pans the aircraft to follow the Trinidad. And here's the finished shot. In feature films, episodic television, and commercials, helicopters are an indispensable tool in motion picture production. Flying a camera ship is one of the most demanding and rewarding jobs in aviation. It requires the highest level of flying skill and an in-depth knowledge of film and television production. For the few pilots who fly them for a living, Hollywood helicopters offer an unparalleled aviation challenge. A chair-type parachute must have been packed by a certified and appropriately rated parachute rigger within the preceding 60 days, 90 days, or 120 days. The correct answer is number 3, 120 days.
Some of today's pilots do receive spin training, such as you see here. The airplane is pulled into a stall, a rudder is kicked to induce the spin, and after a few rotations, spin recovery is executed. This student pilot is getting a valuable exercise in unusual attitudes and spin recovery, but not necessarily in spin avoidance. Stall spin accidents account for almost half of all general aviation fatalities. They score about 1 kill each and every day. And because most of them occur at low altitude, only about 5% are recoverable. Now that's right. Even an expert pilot with superb training has little or no chance of recovering from an inadvertent low-altitude spin. So in this feature, my goal is not only to explain the dynamics of the spin and how to recover from one, but more importantly, I'd like to show you the conditions that can lead to a lethal spin, the unexpected low-altitude kind that not even an airshow pilot can recover from. We're at Screaming Eagle Aviation at Santa Paula Airport in Southern California to take you up in this super decathlon for a little demonstration. But before we fire up, a little planning is in order. Always check the pilot's operating handbook for weight and balance limitations for aerobatic flight. They usually are much more restricted than for normal flight. Also, be sure to check the cockpit thoroughly. Make sure there are no loose objects that could become dangerous flying missiles. Parachutes, of course, often are required for aerobatic flight. And make sure that the area in which you intend to practice is off airways and that you'll be complying with other applicable FAA regulations. Okay, let's get going, shall we? Since 1949, the FAA has not required spin training for private pilots. As a matter of fact, most airplanes produced since then are not even approved for spins. Modern training emphasizes stall avoidance. The theory is, if you don't stall, you won't spin. Before 1949, however, more people were killed learning how to recover from a spin than were being saved by it.
Now what I'm about to show you is the most common method used to teach spins. And the spin recovery technique is called the NASA Standard Method, and it applies to most general aviation airplanes. Now our altitude right now is 5,000 feet, and the best way to enter a spin is to first retard the throttle all the way, allow the airspeed to bleed off somewhat, raise the nose, and just as the airplane stalls, we apply full right rudder to enter the right turning spin.
Notice how a stall becomes a spin. As the aircraft yaws to the right wing drops. Normally, stability would cause that wing to come back up again. But since the wing is stalled, the relative wind comes up to meet the dropping wing at a larger angle, which deepens the stall for that wing. At the same time, the left wing rises, which reduces its angle of attack. It becomes unstalled, and the amount of lift is increased. This is the incipient or beginning stage of the spin. Now the spin develops into the steady stage. Here there is a relatively constant rotation rate, a constant and slow airspeed, and a fairly constant altitude loss with each turn. To maintain this steady stage, note that I've got to hold the stick all the way back to keep the airplane stalled. The third stage involves recovery. During an inadvertent spin, make sure the flaps are retracted. The wake turbulence from extended flaps can erode elevator and rudder effectiveness. Also, spin recovery ends with a high-speed dive that could damage extended flaps. Also, be sure to immediately close the throttle. Engine power produces a nose-up pitching moment, which can make recovery more difficult or even impossible. Neutralize the ailerons. Applying opposite aileron to help stop the spinning may seem tempting, but this can actually increase the rotation rate because of adverse yaw effect.
apply full opposite rudder. This may not be immediately effective, but hold full rudder opposite to the direction of the spin. If in doubt about which pedal to push, refer to the turn needle or turn coordinator and push the pedal opposite to the direction of indicated turn. When rotation is about to stop, briskly neutralize the elevator to unstall the wings. Do not apply nose-down elevator before applying rudder, because this could increase the rotation rate. Also, excessive forward pressure while still auto-rotating can tuck the airplane into an inverted spin, which can be so disorienting that you might never recover at all. When rotation stops, immediately neutralize the rudder pedals. If you hold opposite rudder too long, spin rotation could start in the opposite direction. As airspeed builds, recover from the steep dive with normal techniques. The back pressure must be enough to avoid excessive speed, yet not so much as to cause an excessive G-load or an accelerated stall.
Now look how much altitude we've lost in less than 2 rotations. You can readily begin to appreciate why a spin from below pattern altitude is virtually unrecoverable.
Okay, here's the whole recovery again in real time. Nose up, stall, right rudder to begin spin, flaps up, throttle closed, opposite rudder, stick forward, neutralize the rudder, dive recovery. The whole maneuver took only a few seconds, but the plane lost 1,000 feet.
Although this recovery technique works pretty well in most light single-engine airplanes, be sure to always follow the recommendations in the pilot's operating handbook for the airplane you're flying, especially when flying twins and warbirds and jet airplanes, for example.
The problem with learning spins this way is that the pilot learns to believe that the nose must be held high above the horizon for the stall to occur, but nothing could be farther from the truth.
The most dangerous stall spin accident usually occurs as the result of a skidding turn while turning from base to final approach. Here, let me show you what it looks like.
Assume that the airplane is on base leg and slightly low on the approach and is about to overshoot final approach. The pilot fails to roll the airplane enough for the required turn, possibly because of ground shyness. Instead, he turns the airplane with bottom rudder. This causes a cross-controlled skidding turn. The excessive rudder increases bank angle and forces the nose down, and the pilot, who's busily lining up with the runway, counters with opposite aileron and back pressure. Here's what happens if the airspeed decays and cross-controlling is sufficient. The airplane simply enters a spin toward the low wing. This is called an under-the-bottom spin. In the traffic pattern, it is usually fatal. Here's another spin scenario that is equally lethal. This type of spin accident usually occurs at takeoff at high-density altitude, often with an obstacle to clear at the end of the runway. The pilot isn't getting the performance he expects, but proceeds with the takeoff anyway. He pulls the nose high to clear the obstacle, is holding strong right rudder because of torque and propeller effect, and he attempts to turn. He's on the edge of a stall and is skidding. From a safer altitude, here's what can happen. The upper wing stalls, and the airplane performs what is called an over-the-top spin. Notice how the airplane rolls completely inverted, and then enters a conventional spin. Near the ground, this is unrecoverable and usually fatal.
Most pilots know that a stall must precede a spin, but many don't realize that a spin usually will not develop unless the airplane is either slipping or skidding at the time it is stalled.
Well, that's about it for this lesson. The subject of spin training is highly controversial, with intelligent advocates on both sides of the issue. If you choose to avoid spin training, that's fine. There's good reason for that course of action. But if you do choose to obtain some spin training, make sure you have a very experienced, qualified instructor, and make sure you have an airplane approved for spins. Frankly, I like an airplane approved for aerobatics. It provides an extra margin of safety. One exercise I recommend is practicing yaw control in deep oscillation stalls. This consists of entering a conventional power-off, wings-level stall. But instead of recovering, keep the stick fully aft and the ailerons neutral. The airplane will oscillate about all three axes and may display a tendency to spin one way or the other. Learn to aggressively apply rudder and keep the airplane on an even keel. My best advice, though, for avoiding spins is simple. Avoid the stall. And as they say, maintain thy airspeed, lest the earth shall arise and smite thee.
I hope you've enjoyed this video edition of ABC's Wide World of Flying as much as we've enjoyed producing it. In our next episode, Barry Schiff will give you an introduction to flying tail draggers. These airplanes offer the most fun and the lowest expense in flying today, if you know how to fly them. And Bill Cox takes you on a checkout of a Mach-E Superstar 700. Light twins are a bargain in today's used airplane market, and this Mach-E conversion is capable of an honest 300-mile-an-hour cruise in pressurized comfort. Once again, a reminder to those of you who haven't renewed, do so right away. Your renewal now means uninterrupted service. Plus, our bonus newsletter will be sent in less than 6 weeks. Speaking of the newsletter, in our last issue, we announced details on how you can purchase back video issues and the Voyager tape. A handy order blank is also contained within this tape package. Now stay with us for the bonus buyer's guide. And until our next quarterly video, safe flying.
Looking ahead, mark your calendar right now for October 6th, 7th, and 8th. Nashville, Tennessee will be the site of the next AOPA annual convention, based at the Opryland Hotel. Down-home hospitality and great country music should make for a most enjoyable aviation experience. The theme for this year's convention is What's Happening Up There. This is your chance to find out how the current regulatory climate is affecting you and what you can do to protect your rights. The highlights of the convention include lunch with the Secretary of Transportation, James Burnley, where you can hear his views on airspace usage and other pending legislation. A dinner cruise aboard the paddle wheel steamboat General Jackson with a 19th century musical review. A report from AOPA President John Baker will bring you up to date on the significant activities of the association and the challenges facing us today. An evening at the Grand Ole Opry will be an unforgettable entertainment experience. An update from Donald Engen will introduce you to new training and safety programs from the Foundation. And the closing banquet will open the beginning of AOPA's 50th anniversary with fun and surprises. Here's a sample of the seminars offered at this year's convention. Buying a used aircraft. Recognizing hazardous weather. Single pilot IFR. Avoiding the stall spin scenario. Locating parts. Refurbishing your aircraft. And much, much more. For more information or to register right now to assure good room selection, call this toll-free number. 1-800-USA-AOPA. Be there.
Hello, fellow pilots. I'm John King of King Schools. I'm going to share a tip with you from our new takeoff courses that shows why flying slow, in some cases, could be a good thing.
And I'm Martha King. I'm going to share a tip with you from our new takeoff courses on how looking at just 2 numbers will tell you a great deal about your next flight.
Most of us fly airplanes to go fast. That's why it's difficult to make ourselves slow down, even when flying slow has advantages. Now, one time slowing down makes sense is in turbulence. Cutting your airspeed in half reduces the impact from jolts from turbulence to 1/4 of what they were before. Turn radius is also dependent on airspeed. Cutting the airspeed in half reduces the turn radius to 1/4 of what it was at the higher speed. Now, when you're flying in marginal visibility or in the mountains, this means you can maneuver in 1/4 of the space. So as much as we'd all like to go fast, Here are a couple of cases where taking decisive action to slow the airplane down just could make the trip a lot safer and a lot more comfortable.
Most of us know that a temperature dew point spread of 5 degrees or less could mean low visibility soon. But you can learn a lot more than that about your trip just by looking at these two numbers. First, you can estimate the base of cumulus clouds in thousands of feet by dividing the temperature dew point spread by 4.4. Let's assume a temperature of 70 degrees Fahrenheit and a dew point of 48 degrees. The spread is 22 degrees. Divide that spread by 4.4 and you'll find the base of the cumulus clouds is 5,000 feet above ground level. If you don't have a calculator, just divide by 4 degrees instead and you'll still be within 10%. This same calculation will also approximate the top of the haze layer and the top of the turbulence in the haze below. Temperature alone can tell you how bumpy things will be in convective turbulence. Every 20-degree increase in temperature doubles the amount of moisture the air can hold. And the amount of moisture in the air is directly related to the amount of energy available for convection. So understanding these two little numbers could make your next trip go a whole lot smoother.
Here's a complete new library of King action video subjects to take you beyond the written. Communications, how to use your radio for increased safety and utility. Weather-wise, everything you need to know about the weather and what to do about it as a pilot. The complete airspace review unscrambles the alphabet soup of airspace requirements and lets you fly anywhere with confidence. Rules to fly by. Learn the hidden secrets of your pilot's operating handbook. How to prevent mechanical problems, avoid optical illusions, and understand the federal aviation regulations. Practical piloting, tricks of the trade, and rules of thumb to get you the most out of your aircraft. VFR with confidence, how to plan a safe trip even in marginal weather conditions. IFR with confidence, advanced navigation and procedures that you need to know to make a safe trip even in a difficult IFR flight. The complete Jeppesen chart review. Total understanding of Jefferson approach and en-route charts, SIDS, and stars. And now, King flight test courses show you how to ace your private pilot, commercial or instrument flight test. An actual FAA examiner tells you what he expects, and a flight instructor shows you how to demonstrate your knowledge on the ground and in the air. Each flight test course includes 2 videotapes and the Practical Test Standards booklet. King takeoff videos, including 2 tape flight test courses, are sold singly for $39 each, or order any 5 for only $99, or all 11 for only $189. King written exam courses contain at least 5 2-hour videotapes. King course book with detailed notes, every FAA question and correct answer. Practice exams with answers and explanations. A sign-off form to take your FAA exam and a beautiful personalized graduation certificate suitable for framing. The private pilot exam course is only $169. Commercial, flight instructor, instrument flight instructor, airline transport pilot, and flight engineer exam courses, each $199. And now take advantage of King School's all-time best ever exam course offer. With any King written exam course, you also receive your choice of 4 new King takeoff videos free. Call 1-800-854-1001 right now. Your order will be processed immediately and shipped out the same day it's received. Plus, you'll receive a 20-day free trial. And if you fail your test, keep the course and get your money back. King Schools, 4 takeoff videos free with your exam course order. Same-day shipping and complete money-back guarantee. King's the one. Ask anyone who flies. Call 1-800-854-1001 and order now.
If you are viewing a borrowed copy of Wide World of Flying and would enjoy having your own subscription, or you would like to order a subscription as a very special gift for a pilot or aviation enthusiast, credit card holders may call us toll-free at 1-800-999-8783. Or you may send a personal check to our subscription center in Riverton, New Jersey. The price is just $99.95 for 1 full year.